I was born and raised in North Dakota. Back when I was in high school, a group of us would research murders that occurred out in the county. We would then go out and find the scenes and film the exploration at night. It was something to do while we got wasted on shitty beer and just teenage bullshit. Eventually, we ran out of places to go and got really good at finding abandoned rural farmsteads by driving dirt roads and just looking for signs. Rut roads, deliberate tree groves, and old mailbox posts were common markers. We were out looking when we spotted a tree grove that was out of place and drove through the field and discovered an old, but not too old, house. It had padlocks on the outside doors that were knocked off pretty easily. We dispatched of them and entered the kitchen. There were 6 of us, all with flashlights, and we lit up the kitchen/dining area fairly easy. The table was the initial thing that you noticed, and it was strange because of how normal it actually looked. It was set for a meal. Not a bowl was out of place. The only thing was, we'd been in dozens of these houses, and place settings were a first, especially unbroken ones. As we investigated the area, we found the fridge had the disgusting remnants of a full stock, and the cupboards were full of canned and dry foods. This was definitely also a first. One guy found mail on the counter from early June 1978, and another found a creepy-ass TV guide in the living room with UFOs on the cover. All the family photos were still hanging up. Mom, dad, brother, sister, in their 1970s glory. The furniture was dusty, but in good condition. Closets were full. Everything was totally normal, which was abnormal. As we continued to dig around the house, we all started to realize that this house had not been moved out of. It had been straight up abandoned. Imagine locking the door to your house and just never coming back. That's the state this house was in. Complete, unplanned departure. We went upstairs and split into 3 pairs to check out the 3 rooms. Ours was the closest, and obviously it was the younger boy's room. I can't describe what it looked like too well because almost right away from the hall, we heard the most fucking terrifying scream that I've ever had the misfortune of hearing. We were running down the hallway, and we're all yelling questions at one another around the same time. After a few really long seconds, the 2 screamers caught their breath and said, "You have to go in and see," walking down the hall and through the doorway. I prayed that I wouldn't act like a pussy in front of my friends. I shouldn't have been concerned, because the others were as scared as I was. The room itself opened up, and to the left of the doorframe, and centered on the right side of the room, was a queenish-sized bed, propped up on the pillows with a blanket drawn to the waist, arms on top of the blanket, and worst of all, the head was turned slightly, so it was looking you straight in the eyes when you entered the room. It was a life-size porcelain doll. Snow white skin, jet black hair, cold, dead eyes. The dead eyes lit up our flashlights, like she was waiting for us. If the head hadn't been turned, I could excuse it, but it was turned, ready for you when you walked in. Ready for 20 years. Hasty fucking exits were made down those stairs and back into our car. It was during the ride we started to get even more creeped out, because we realized that even though the house had been abandoned, someone had taken the time to set up that goddamn doll. Not packing food, clothes, or family photos. Setting up the doll was one of the last things done in this house. We researched their names, but got nothing. No tragic car accident, no grisly massacre, no extended family. Just a tacky time capsule in the middle of nowhere. We found out that the county had been taking possession of the land for non-payment of taxes, explaining the locks. Never tracked down any more information on what happened to them, or why they left that fucking doll. When I was in college, I took this job for this eccentric guy who was trying to manufacture these machines for some company. I would just show up and assemble the machines for around 4 hours a day. It was a quiet and pretty easy job. It was just this guy, some of his family working for him, an accountant, and myself. The job was in this small town, which was now run down. Used to be an old gold mining town between the 1890s and 1910s. The building I was in was just part of the entire block of buildings that was all connected. The building itself was about 100 years old and was 3 stories. It had a basement which was sealed off with an entrance from an old warehouse next door. The middle story was completely empty, just a big room with some pillars. The top floor, where I was working, had high arched ceilings and a big beam that ran across the center of the room. The top floor was accessed by a rickety set of stairs with a room to the right and a big room to the left, and then a small room in the back. The room to the right was just some half-empty shelves with some engineering books. The small room in the back is where the accountant's desk was at. The main room, where I was just a long table with some shelves in the middle. I was short some hours because of finals, so I asked the boss if I could work late one night. He said it would be just fine. Just make sure I lock the front door when I leave. About 5 p.m., everybody had left. After they left, I checked the front door at the bottom of the stairs just to make sure that it was locked. I sat there and worked for about 2 hours without incident. Then I heard someone coming up the stairs. Those stairs were old and rickety. They creaked and groaned with the lightest step. I thought nothing of it. I assumed the boss forgot something, maybe a book or something, and was over in the other room just looking for it. I didn't hear anything and called out after a few minutes. Nobody answered though. To access the back room or anywhere else, a person coming up those stairs would have had to walk right by me. No one walked by me. I finally decided to get up and go into the other room to see who it was. Well, I walk around the corner and no one's there. I'm not scared or anything, just confused. The rooms are big and mostly empty, so it only took a minute to walk around the place and it was definitely empty. I stood at the top of the stairs perplexed for a few minutes and then decided that someone was just messing with me. I literally went over and started moving the bookshelves to see if there was something behind them. There was nothing. Not that there was any point, but I searched the building again. This time upstairs and the big empty room downstairs. I even checked the door, which was still locked. I felt a little bewildered, tried to come up with possibilities in my head. I finally came to the conclusion that someone in another part of the building must be doing some construction or something, causing those stairs to shake. It was a long shot, but what alternative was there? I went ahead and clocked out, went down the stairs and made sure the front door was locked. This was my first time working late, and the boss told me to ensure that that door was locked when I left. I even double checked it. My plan was to go next door and see if they were doing some sort of construction or something. I felt like I needed an excuse as to why I didn't get much done, because I was walking around trying to figure out who walked up those stairs. When I went outside, I realized the entire block was completely empty. This is an old industrial area. Not only was the block empty, but every block around it. I was still convinced that someone was in another building and they caused the stairs to shake. I got in my car and drove around the back side of the buildings to see if maybe they were working in the back. Nope, another block that was completely void of anyone. To me, being in a desolate area like that was even creepier than whatever caused those stairs to shake. I circled around the entire block in less than a minute, decided that I would just go home. As I drive back by our building, my heart about explodes. The front door is now wide open. So it's about 7:30 p.m. Pitch black outside except for a street light at the very end of the block. There are no cars or people anywhere as far as the eye can see. I stop the car and just sit there like an idiot, staring for about a minute. I finally calm down and decide to drive right up next to the door and see if I can see any lights in the building. Nope, again, it's pitch black inside. At this point, I'm debating how badly I want to keep this job. I worked at Kmart before this, and I certainly don't want to go back to working with customers again. This job paid a lot better as well. If I leave with that door wide open, I could get fired. If I go close the door, I'm gonna probably shit my pants out of fright. Being a poor college student, I found my balls and, with the car still running, got out, ran over to the door and slammed it shut. Then twisted the handle to see if it was locked. It was not. It seemed like minutes, but probably took a fraction of a second. I opened the door just enough to reach inside and turn the lock. I slammed the door again and twisted the handle again to make sure that it was locked. It was. But before I could take my hand off the handle, I heard those stairs shaking again. Even if I had looked, I wouldn't have seen anything because the stairs were pitch black. But needless to say, I didn't look. I turned pale white and ran the few steps back to my car and slammed the door. threw it in gear, and floored it. I was driving so fast I had to slam on the brakes for the stop sign at the intersection. I don't know what possessed me, but I looked over my shoulder, guess out of morbid curiosity. It was dark, but I could see the door. It was still shut, so I went home. I went back to work the next day and debated for a long time if I should say anything or not. I finally decided I had to say something and talk to the guy's son. I explained that something kind of weird happened to me here last night. He replied by asking me if I heard noises. I shook my head up and down. Then he told me that he thinks this place is haunted or something. He said he used to work nights and would see shadows and hear noises, but he wouldn't go into detail. He just said that he doesn't work alone or at night here anymore. He said I shouldn't work at night anymore either, and they would let his dad, my boss, know not to ask me. I never got any more information out of him about his experience, and I didn't feel comfortable explaining my entire experience to him either. I told him about the stairs rattling, but not about the open door. The strange thing was that the boss would work late by himself many times. He told his son he was stupid and to cut his bullshit. He didn't care much for me either after his son told him that I didn't want to work nights anymore. Between the strange occurrences and the boss treating me with less respect, I found a new job in a few weeks and left. Years later, I see my old boss in the newspaper. They had said his business went under and he was being evicted from the building. He refused to leave, and when the cops came to force him out, they found him dead. He had hung himself in the center of the room from the center beam in that building, in the same room I used to work in. The reason that it made the paper was because they thought it was a murder, because there was nothing below him that he could have stood onto to get his head into the noose. After a few weeks, they couldn't find any evidence for a murder or motive for it. So the only conclusion was that he climbed to a shelf near the wall and somehow, either hand over hand or walking on the beam, got to the center of the beam to hang himself. I never saw that family again. I'd heard that they moved to Florida to live with their other family. When I was 14, I was asked to babysit my 3 younger cousins, ages 8, 4, and 1, in an extremely rural mountainous part of Pennsylvania. My aunt and uncle had to go to a wedding over an hour away and wouldn't be back home until very late. Their house was situated on a steep mountainside. Their back deck had a 15-foot drop onto a rocky hill below, leading down into a river. Their closest neighbors were about a half a mile away. The closest main road was a mile away, and at night there were no lights to be seen anywhere around them. Basically, it was in the middle of nowhere, and you would have to know where you're going to get there. You don't just accidentally end up there. My aunt and uncle had left us with some pizza and their cell phone number next to their landline. This was in the early 2000s. I didn't have a cell phone, but even if I did, I wouldn't get reception there anyway. So after leaving the pizza and their number, they headed out. The baby was already asleep. The 4-year-old wasn't feeling very well and was quietly watching TV in the living room as he dozed off. And the 8-year-old was playing Guitar Hero with me up in the loft. The loft overlooked the living room to the left, where I could keep an eye on the 4-year-old. There was a huge window that overlooked the driveway to the right. The description of the driveway is an important detail to the story. The road that led to their house ran straight into their forked driveway. It was on a dead-end road. The house was as far as you could go. Go to the left driveway, and there is an open carport, and that's where my aunt and uncle, or anyone who ever visited, would park. The right driveway led down a very short but very steep hill to a large leveled out area, and ended against a garage door that opened up into the basement of the house. It was never used as a garage, but served as my uncle's man cave, and that's where he spent most of his time. Right beside the garage door, a normal door with a window, so you could see right in. But this driveway was exclusively used by the kids as a play area because it was the only flat part of the yard-like area on the property. And being on a mountainside, there isn't really much room to play safely. No cars ever drove down there, ever. There are too many toys and bikes in the way, and friends and family knew about this. It was 10 p.m., pitch black outside, no moon to illuminate the area either. My cousin and I were still playing Guitar Hero when headlights caught the corner of my eye, and not the headlights of my aunt's minivan. Huge truck headlights with those roof lights you see on Jeeps or other off-road trucks. Not only that, the truck was going down the right driveway, the kids' play area. Again, this was not my aunt and uncle. This was not anyone that they knew. Panic and dread filled my body. I was a small teenage girl alone in an isolated house on a mountain at night with 3 children in my care. In a terrified voice, I asked my cousin, "Who is that? Jake? Do you know whose truck that is?" Then he looked panicked. "No, I've never seen that truck before," he replied. I quickly ushered him downstairs, still unsure of what to do, but the 2 little ones were sleeping down there, and I wanted to make sure that they were safe. I checked on the baby, then grabbed the phone to call 911. Then I started to hear the metal garage door being shaken violently. No one ever opened up that garage door. More panic began to fill me. I hear them try the door beside it, the metal doorknob jiggling. No one was actually knocking. It's not like they were checking to see if my uncle was down there or something. Plus, the lights were out. It was dark down there, and they knew no one was down there. It was clear at this point. They were definitely breaking in. The door leading to the basement steps was right next to the phone, so I could hear all this clearly as it's going on. I quickly turned the little lock on the doorknob just in case they made it into the basement. My heart was practically jumping out of my chest, talking to the dispatcher as my 8-year-old cousin clings to my arm. The operator is calm and trying to calm me down, but I knew it would be at least 30 minutes until a police officer could get all the way up here, assuming that they didn't get lost on this mountainside in the pitch dark. Just kept thinking, we're f***ed. We're dead. This is how I die. The operator asked for the number my aunt and uncle left me so that she could have another dispatcher call them to let them know the situation. I turned around to grab the paper with the number on it, and to my absolute horror, see a man peering in the large sliding glass door. A huge, burly, what had to have been a 6'4" man with a long, scraggly red hair and a big red bushy beard. It made it worse. He was grinning at me. Grinning in a way that still scares me to this day. Meanwhile, I had to have looked like a terrified deer in headlights, shaking so hard that I could barely hold the phone. There was a second man behind him, but I couldn't see him as well. I have no idea what he looked like, but he was for sure just as equally tall, but more lanky than the larger man at the sliding glass door. I screamed, "Oh my God, they're here!" And just before the 911 operator could say anything, my 8-year-old cousin goes, "Mr. Jim?" His voice was very confused. It wasn't like my cousin was happy or even relieved to see him. I asked, "You know who that is?" But before my cousin could answer, I turned my attention to the man in the door. "I'm on the phone with the police," I shouted. I'm grateful he didn't try that door because I do not think it was locked. The man just stared at me for a moment, eyebrows furrowed, like deciding what he wanted to do next. But then he just backed away into the darkness. It seemed like an eternity later. I saw the truck lights back out of the driveway and then continue back down the road until they disappeared. I was still scared shitless, and so was my cousin. He had only met that guy a few times, an acquaintance of his dad. It wasn't like he was a close family friend or anything. And obviously, because again, he went down the wrong driveway. Visitors never go down that way. The 911 operator asked for a description of him, then told me they'd gotten in touch with my aunt and uncle and that they were on their way home. She stayed on the phone with me until a police officer showed up a little bit later, just to make sure the men were gone, and then they stayed with us until my aunt and uncle got home, so they could ask them a few questions. My uncle was furious, not at me for calling them home early, but at this Mr. Jim guy. He muttered something like, "I'll f*** him up." My aunt was mad at my uncle and told him to tell Jim to never come back here again. I didn't know at the time, but my uncle had a really bad drug problem. I don't know what Mr. Jim or his accomplice were doing, or what they would have done if I wasn't on the phone with the police. But that grin I saw, it was not a friendly one. It was sinister. And again, he also had to have known my uncle was not there because that basement was completely dark. He would have seen through the windowed basement door. He also tried lifting the garage door, something not even my uncle did. He intended to break into the basement. That much is very clear to me. There's no other explanation. I never did babysit for them again, and I don't think I ever went back up there because not long after that, my aunt divorced my uncle and moved out. So, Mr. Jim, the grinning burly mountain man who tried to break into the house where I was, let's not meet again. In early 2007, I was on a traveling singing group. There were 8 of us on a team, and the team members were switched every single year. We were invited to stay at the evening at the house of a previous member named Drew. Drew wasn't home, so it was his mom, his sister, and his brother who hosted us. Now, we'd all known Drew's dad died about 4 years earlier, but he died of a heart attack and not in the house. I generally try not to be superstitious, but I went into the house and immediately felt just a little uncomfortable. I think I blamed it on the fact that Drew and I never really seen eye to eye, or that I felt bad for his mom, who'd been widowed so young and left with 3 children. A sleeping space was very limited, got put down on a cot in the basement, along with the other girl in my team. The basement wasn't a creepy basement by any means. It had been refinished and was pretty comfortable. My cot was only about a foot from the wall, and there was a small old digital clock between the wall and the cot. I fell asleep in my usual manner, facing the wall, back to the room. At 2:48, and I'll never forget the clock since it was the only thing that I could focus on, I woke up very suddenly. I was immediately frozen in bed. My heart was racing, my throat went tight, and I couldn't swallow. This was primal fear at its best. I couldn't roll over to check, but I swear, even now, that something was standing over me. Everything in my instinct told me not to turn around. It felt like my life was depending on me staying right where I was. During this time of intense fear, I kept seeing images in my mind, flashes of gore and horrible things. I could also hear a laughing in my ears, but not the voice of just one person laughing. It sounded like I was in a room with thousands of voices laughing. I remember for the first time having suicide run across my mind during this overwhelming, fear-driven time. I should note here that I'm not, and I've never been suicidal. When that feeling went away, the last thing I remember hearing in my mind was, "Not this one." I looked at the clock again, and only 9 minutes had passed. The longest 9 minutes of my life. A few hours later when I got up, I decided I was going to get the hell out of there as quickly as I possibly could. I skipped the shower and breakfast and sat in the van waiting for the rest of my team. As I was waiting, Drew's brother came out and spoke with me. And in one sentence he said, "I'm sorry I couldn't help you this morning." As he said it, he had tears in his eyes. He honestly looked like he was going to be sick to me. The look of hopelessness in his eyes still haunts me to this day. 2 weeks later, we got word that Drew's brother had killed himself just before 3 a.m. Ever since the incident, I still occasionally will have dreams about that laughing. Part of me wonders if I would have just tried talking to his brother, maybe things would have been different. I never spoke about this to anyone but my husband. It brings back a chill to my spine just writing this down, and an overwhelming sense of guilt. I don't know what to make of it, or what the hell really happened inside that house. And part of me never wants to know either. This story is from a childhood friend who told me this, and it still unnerves me to this day. She was genuinely freaked out, and her family even backed up her claims, so here it goes. My friend and her family moved into this rental property, and my friend claimed that it was haunted. Everyone agreed that there was an off feeling, and those who visited or stayed over there would mention it as well. I myself experienced this odd feeling of foreboding whenever I went over there, and believed the consensus that the house was indeed haunted. It honestly felt oppressive inside there, and you would feel this pitiful dread that is hard to compute into words. It was extremely uncomfortable to experience, just to say the least. Anyway, this particular event, and that is the basis of this post, was enough for my friend's family to pack up and stay with relatives until they moved out permanently. On this fateful afternoon, my friend had arrived back home from the park and heard an argument taking place in the kitchen between her mom and dad. My friend thought this was odd, as both of her parents should be at work, so she called out, "Mom?" before unlocking the front door and going inside. My friend said the house felt instantly silent. An uncanny silence, like all the air had been sucked out of the place. It felt stifling. It felt wrong. Then her mom said, "Hey, we're just in here." My friend was just outside, closed the kitchen door at this point, and froze beyond opening. It was her mother's voice, but there was something off. Like the cadence was missing that made it actually her mother's. It sounded flat and unnatural. My friend decided to bolt back out the front door and wait until her brother came home. But she said as she turned back, she saw her mother peering at her from the lounge room window. But it wasn't her mother. The face was the same. Everything was the same. But her face was devoid of anything that actually made it her mother. There was no recognition on her mother's face. There was no indication that she was looking directly at her daughter. There's no emotion in the expression. Nothing. The eyes looked unstaring and utterly blank. My friend screamed and ran down the street to her mother's work and confirmed that she was there this entire time and had never been at home. Initially, my friend's mother reasoned that someone must have broke in, but at a later investigation, it proved nothing had been stolen. The back door was locked, as was the front door when my friend came home. No one could rationalize who my friend saw in the window and why it looked so much like her mother. So that was the deciding factor to nope the f*** out of there and find somewhere else to live. The landlord of the house denied anything like this had happened while they lived there, but did admit that tenants didn't stay long, saying there was something wrong in the house. My friend also told me that she was the only one who actually saw anything definitively sinister inside that house. But her family said they definitely felt an evil presence there, which ultimately manifested into the doppelganger experience that my friend had had. Utterly terrifying. Hey everybody, thanks for listening if you stuck around to this point. If you haven't yet, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and that notification bell to be notified when future episodes come out. If you have a true scary story of your own, feel free to send it to my email or post it to my subreddit. You can stalk me on Twitter, you can stalk me on Facebook, and you can also stalk me on Instagram. All of these links are below. What's up everybody? So, if you've listened to any of my outros in the past, or at least recently in the past couple of weeks, I have stated to you and told you multiple times that I am going to get on a schedule. And thus far, I have not stuck to that whatsoever. But I know there's most of you that don't give a shit, but I care because I need to get into this habit and this ritual and make it routine for me to start doing this. And thus far, I think what works best for me is Wednesdays and Sundays. So Wednesdays and Sundays from here on out, no longer Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's just don't have enough time to get episodes, find stories, do all that in that minimum amount of time. So Wednesdays right in the middle of the week, Sunday right at the end of the week. So that'll give you plenty of time and me plenty of time to do that. So I think that's what I'm going to start doing here in the future. I also am going to be uploading to Horrid a lot more than I planned before too, because I found somebody else that can help write, do scripts and stuff like that. So look out for that as well if you're interested in that channel. I got a really good episode that should be actually coming out either tomorrow or Friday. So yeah, please be on the lookout for that on that channel. Thank you for listening. Yeah, please continue to like and share this with as many people as you possibly can, because yeah, I want to get bigger. I want to blow up, or not even blow up. I just want to continue to grow, and I would continue to tell scary stories to people and find more people that enjoy my voice and my style and my channel. So yeah, I'd appreciate that. I appreciate the support. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you listening and liking and doing all that rad stuff. So yeah, I don't think I got anything else. So I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. I hope you have a fantastic weekend and the rest of your week. And I'll see you on Sunday for, I think it's going to be either field trip stories or missing 411/state park stories. So yeah, See you on Sunday. Yeah, cheers.